Bobbie Allen. My husband Jimmy and I moved here in 1949, the first day of October, to take over Tip Top Cleaners and Laundry. And the next Sunday we went to church. It was that red brick, they called it two-story, but the basement was not down deep like a regular basement. It was just charted part way. And to get into the sanctuary, you had to go up a flight of stairs to get there. And the youth had what we called the basement. They met down there in that ugly, dark part. And we had a choir. Of course, Jimmy joined the choir immediately, and I had two little boys, one 4 and one 2. And then we were expecting, I just went blank. We were expecting a baby in December. I can't see me. I'm not on there.
That's okay. You're on these two, so it's okay.
Okay. I don't want to be lost. And Brother Ratliff was our pastor. There was a little wooden cottage next door. I think it says in here when that was built, and that was the pastor's home for him. Now, they had met in the first building, which was on the corner of Common and Union. And there's this great big tree there. And I said, in one of the pictures, that's that tree. And Keith said, no, that's not the tree. I said, of course it's the tree. It's right there. You can see it in the picture. Well, that's not the kind of tree it was. Now, I don't know one tree from another. And I said, no, I know that according to where the building is, that's the tree. So now he's gone, and that can be the tree. Ha ha on him.
But there's a picking pack.
And apart from across, what is that, Common and what is that other street?
Union.
Union. See, I can. Okay, there's a big two-story house, and that's I think that's the one that's now used as the day school. Carol Rayfield's husband, his aunts lived in that house, and then across Common Street, another one, and it's a doctor or a dentist has an office there, and there's a stairway going up to the top. And so Carol Rayfield's in-laws built those houses, and I'm trying to get her to write that down or make a tape, what she remembers about that. Anyway, the church outgrew that little house. Most of the members lived out on the ranch. And we need to get Judy Carback.
She's coming. She's going to do one.
That to tell about what her mother and father said, because all that River Oaks property used to be the Carback Ranch. And for them to come into church was an ordeal because they had a lot of kids and they had to come by wagon. So they decided it was time to build a bigger building. So they decided to go out of town on the edge where there's no traffic and build a church, which is the church we go to. And they built this red brick building, and like I say, it had a basement. And the preacher's house was right next to home, was right next door. And so we did a lot of things to make money. The UMW was real good on having food like pancakes or chili or something like that. And when I was telling about this, we used dishes in which we washed. I'm not sure how hot the water was, But it's a back porch, and the kitchen of the parsonage is where we carried things back and forth. And so, since I was one of the young ones, we were the ones who carried the dirty dishes up a few steps for them to wash, and then got the clean dishes and brought them back out. And we put tables out in the yard, and that's where people ate. We were very excited about having that, and the kids were running around acting crazy, of course. And then we took one bite of that chili, and went, ah! They had donated their venison, and it was venison chili, which Germans are very conservative. They do not want to spend any money they don't have to. So if they donated the venison, because the men had been hunting, that didn't cost them anything. So they had that. Well, it later changed, but they kept using that to raise money, to give away. UMW, it wasn't that then, it was the Woman's Missionary Society. And we met at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I came there, I said, why do you meet at 3 o'clock? Because we have to cook dinner. There was a bell down at the fire station, where the fire station is, and you could hear it all over town. When that sounded, it was noon, you closed the door, went home and ate dinner, and then when you got through, you came back. And so the women had to have a nice hot meal ready for those men. Most of them worked downtown or out at the mill. And so it was easy to walk home and eat and then go back. And so I said, well, one day a month, couldn't we meet at 9 o'clock in the morning when kids are at school? Oh, we have to cook dinner. Could one day a month, could you have leftovers or sandwiches or something? Well, that was a brand new idea. Now, these are good old German women who work hard and probably fix wonderful meals. Now, the idea of feeding those men something light, that seemed foreign, but they kept talking about it, and finally, and there were some other young women, and they said, yeah, then our kids are in school and we can try that. So they said, all right, we're going to try it for a year, and at the end of the year, we'll vote again. Well, we never have voted. We never have. We just said it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. All our activities were in the morning. The UMW was very mission-minded, and they liked to go out into the community and do things. One lady that belonged to our church was Lemming. I think she's Joy. I can't think of her first name. She was a school nurse, and she kept telling us about people who had needs, children who came to school with ragged clothes and not getting enough to eat. And so she was always telling us about this, and we always tried to meet those needs. I think her name was Jewel Lemming. Well, anyway, we continued having those dinners, and the women got tired. That's hard work. They decided to do something else. Well, they decided later on, and I don't know who brought it up or why we did that. They decided to build a proper Wesley Hall. And so this building was attached to the back of that. And you might tell in here. Let's see, the new church building was built in 1913, and they still had, when we came in 1949, they still had the hitching posts out in front. And everybody thought that was so rustic and charming, and New Braunfels, this cute little German town, and so they left them up there. But later, money got the control, and we turned them into parking meters. So But now whoever built those gave permission not to have to put money in on Sunday. So, of course, the church was growing and growing. One thing that I remember during World War II, servicemen would come over from San Antonio, and they knew if they came to New Braunfels, somebody at church would invite them home for dinner, especially if they had young ladies in their house. And then they would show them the river. There was not any Schlitterbahn in it. They'd just go down to the river. And so our church was a good place for the service people to, and so we served them, we served some needy people, and one of these days Margaret Brazel is going to tell about the class we formed for the residents of
River Gardens.
River Gardens, that's right.
But we started it because of one of our members,
Well, there was
Gordon Brown.
yeah. Now I can't think of her name, but anyway, his mother was in the UMW, and Gordy, I think he could read.
He was very high level.
And so we had this class over there. That little building toward the front is the building that was there that stayed. Mrs. Frank Charlton was somewhat of an authority about children's work. And so she wanted the children not to be down in that dark hole, but that building that we now have on the street was built for children, and people came to see it. Isn't that a nice building, my goodness? And we called it the Children's Building. Then we built some classrooms, and so then adults most. So then it was the adult building. Now I don't know what it is. We had a class that met in the front room and one in one of the side rooms. And so then we started having our meetings in there. At any rate, I'm getting ahead of myself because now I forgot what it was I was going to tell about building the buildings. And the parsonage, they decided we needed a better home for the pastors. And so when Daryl and Irene Gray came, they built a parsonage. You know, right across the street is a big garage apartment, and right next to it is a nice big 3-bedroom home, and that was the parsonage, which was very handy because anybody that came to the church and the preacher wasn't there, they'd go over to his house, bang on his door and interrupt anybody who's in there. But so then they turned that old building around toward the back, and that became part of the junior department. And Martha Russ played the piano, and my husband, Jimmy, was the superintendent. At that time, the returning service people had married and produced children, and so we had one of the largest Sunday schools that we ever had. And we divided the girls and boys up because there wasn't a room big enough. And I'm going to brag a little bit. Martha Russ played the piano, and Jimmy led those kids singing. And later, his father died, and so Randy, that was in those boys' class, he came up to Jimmy and said, "Mr. Allen, every time we sing 'This Is My Father's World,' I think about you, and I can just see you up there leading that." Well, who knows? You know, when you're teaching Sunday school, you don't know if it's going in one ear and out the other. But he always enjoyed that. That gave him the idea that maybe all those kids like to sing, so he organized a junior choir. MYF met in the evening on Sunday, and so the junior choir met in the sanctuary just before that. And we did some pretty good programs. I remember one that we had at Christmas for the Methodist men. In that old Wesley Hall, at each end, there were stairs going up to the second floor. Probably wooden, I don't know. Everything was very simple. And that Christmas, he lined them all up and down the stairs to sing songs from other countries. But now I'm ahead of myself again. They thought it would be nice if the junior choir had robes. And there may be one or two in an old closet or something. They called it United Nations Blue. And so the women did this, made the robes, and they had white bows here. And so they really did look good, all lined up and singing. And they didn't just do little kindergarten songs. They did some of the choir songs. One time when our pastor, Merle Waters, and his wife, Marie, and the older boy, Mark, was a year older than my boys, and he could really, well, he didn't have a great voice because he was just in the fourth or fifth grade, but he could carry the tune and he could hear that part. So the junior choir sang two-part harmony, and they'd sing right out. Now Pat Keyes was in there. There was Nancy Nagin, Nancy Fisher, Carolyn Voights, Randy Oakes, and Mark Waters, and probably some bad little kids that I don't remember. So that took care of that. Jimmy sang in the choir in the morning and led the junior choir in the afternoon. So there was that Sunday. And we owned a cleaners and laundry, so people wanted to get their clothes on Saturday, so there went Saturday. And then the rest of the week. So we didn't have any vacations. Once in a while, we would leave early on Saturday and drive over to Houston to visit my folks and to let them take care of those kids. I went home in December and had my baby, and she was very much welcome, because after 2 boys, we're glad to have a girl. Then a little over a year later, I went back over there so they could take care of 3 of them, and I had another little girl. So we had our family, 2 boys and 2 girls, which is the way it ought to be. And if you didn't do that, you're not doing it right. And UMW kept growing and doing more things. We had one group of ladies who met upstairs in the old Wesley Hall to repair the clothes from River Gardens, because they would snap off buttons and loose sashes and just need mending. And so a lot of the ladies brought their machines down there, sewed all one day, mending the clothes. Also, we brought people in the district. Now, as I said, we had a sub-district. They took the San Antonio district and divided into, I believe, 3 sections, so that New Braunfels and Seguin and some little towns below that. And they met once a quarter. And we would go visit, we'd get the women together and go down there and have a meeting. Or they would, when it was our turn, they came to our church. And we fixed food. Methodist women cook. And if you're not a good cook, you shouldn't join the church. Because we're always having luncheons and suppers. And they got the Methodist men organized. And so they asked the UMW at first, and that this was really the way it should have been. The men came and brought a dish. Either some of them said they cooked it themselves, but I'm not sure about that. And so that was another money-making project. So we served Methodist men suppers. And we wrote to missionaries, and if one was coming to our conference, we always signed up to have that missionary come and either speak to our UMW or the whole church. Another project we had over in Austin, where there are a lot of students from other countries, and we had a Methodist building. I don't know if we still have that or not. The Methodist Student Center or something. And Bob Bryan, maybe it wasn't Bob, it's somebody Bryan, B-R-E-I, is that right? Is it Bob? We wrote to him and said we would like to entertain some of your, and we said foreign. Now we learned from that. There are no foreign people, we're all foreigners. Because we all came here from somewhere else. And so he would call and say, okay, I got about 25 students that want to come to New Braunfels. And then we'll advertise in the bulletin, we have these students from other countries, and if you would like to house a couple, we'd be glad for you to do that. And so they would get several drivers, however many they could, go to Austin, get these students and bring them back to our church, and we'd have a covered dish supper. And then pair it off. You get so-and-so and so from wherever. One time, Jimmy and I got two students, one from some Chinese place and one from, I think, not, or maybe it was one Japanese. I don't know. Anyway. And so we had so much fun. We took them home with us, and of course we sat up talking and talking. And these two were enemies, really. Their countries were enemies. But they got to be pretty good friends. And they'd say, how do you say? And they would talk about that and leave us out of it, you know. And so Jimmy was telling them what we like to eat. He's telling them about fig preserve. What's a fig? Well, you know, it's a fruit. What does it look like? We could not find a picture of a fig. Have you ever tried to describe a fig? It was ridiculous, but we did a lot of laughing. And then that was Friday night. And Saturday, took them to the Schlitterbahn. It was new, and Dr. Adams' daughter-in-law was the manager, and she would give us passes for the host family and the two students. And so that's what they did Saturday afternoon. And then they took them out to eat, and they said that was an experience, because those people from all around the world eating in an American cafe. So that was very enjoyable, and we made friends with a lot of them. Now let me think, what else did the UMW? They were always in the middle of everything. Our church is much involved in outreach, always something somewhere else. And at that time, and we need to get one of the sponsors of the youth, they would go over to San Marcos even and help over there at the student center, and to San Antonio, to the Methodist Mission Home, and to the Wesley House. We were always reaching out to other people. And finally, we got old enough and sure of ourselves, we would go to the district meetings and meet some of the other women. And somehow, now you must remember this, our UMW was leader of the district. We had more people, we paid more things. We were very active, and divide them up into 8 circles. So that's how many women were in there. And named the circles after missionaries. And it was funny, you keep that name for 2 years, and then they just stir the circles up and move them around. Now let me think, which circle am I in? And they still do that. Now the circles are named after Bible women. And they still go to the district meetings, and we have them come over there. Now what else? Think of...
You could talk about your participation in the conference.
At conference?
No, the conference you and WSCS.
Oh yeah, we always went to those meetings.
And you were a conference officer.
Lorraine Oakes was elected treasurer of the conference, UMW, and I was missionary personnel for 4 years, and you can only serve one place in 4 years. So then I served 4 years as recording secretary, and that's hard because you get so interested hearing what they're saying, you forget to write it down. But anyway, so we were active there, and we got several women to go to Mount Wesley to the School of Missions, which was a whole week. And you may not believe me, well, y'all might remember, we didn't have air conditioning, but we took fans, and there would be 300 women from across the conference. And they brought in experts to teach classes on the various studies that we had. It was very good because we had people from the Black Church and the Rio Grande Conference and ours mixed and mingled, and as teachers. I know that well, I can't think of his name, so I'm not going to tell you about him. He writes Sunday school material, and quite often in the Adult Quarterly, there's a whole section of lessons that this man taught, and we enjoyed getting to know him. K-A-L-A-S. Is that some?
Ellsworth?
Yeah, Ellsworth, yeah.
Ellsworth
Yeah, and he came there and taught. And we had a weekend for adults, and Buckner Fannin came. He was more fun. We knew him as a Baptist preacher, but when he got there, he was a cut-up, and telling funny stories and getting in line. They'd say, "Oh, Dr. Fannin, you come over here," and he'd go, "Oh, seat with the people, that's all right." And so everybody was so impressed that we have had preachers and leaders who are pretty important. You just ask them. Let me think of something else. What time is it? It is, I can't read this clock, 10:25.
Bobbie, I want to know about when you started as church secretary.
Well, Martha Rust, who was the organist, she also was church secretary, and then she became quite seriously ill. And so then Juanita Nelson was the church secretary. And we had been friends a long time because she also had 4 children. And they were very active in MYF and other activities. And then she decided to quit and do something else. So I went to the committee and applied for the job. All I knew how to do is type. I didn't know anything else. Well, I did know something else, but that's what I used in the office. So I started to work there. One reason I needed to go is my oldest son was going to college, and the other one would be the next one, and then 3 more going to college. And so for some reason they hired me, and that was fun. Joe Adair was the preacher, and he was very precise, everything to be just right. And his wife, Ann, was also the same way, to have everything done orderly and properly. And Joe would type out the bulletin the way he wanted it, and then all I had to do is retype it and run it on the mimeograph. I think I've got all the mimeograph ink off of it by now. But a mimeograph must be a Baptist. No, don't say that. But it was very awkward. Sometimes it would do things and sometimes it wouldn't. but we got everything done. Well, at that time, a volunteer came to help. He was a retired colonel, and he also wanted things done correctly. And everybody was, oh, the colonel. He was Colonel Ellis. And there's no place too far away, no job too hard for him to do for the church. And finally he got to where he came every day to the office to tend to things. He's the kind of guy who go around trying out the doorknobs, make sure they're not loose, or trying out locks, make sure everything's in good order. And then at 10 o'clock every morning, the janitor's wife would make coffee and bring it over to my office, and the preacher, D. Ray Allison, and the janitor, and Colonel Ellis, and I would sit in there and have a very important meeting to talk about many serious things. And it was fun, really fun. I hated it when the phone rang and interrupted. But one thing we had, because it would cost money, they had one phone for the church, but they had phones up in the youth room and in the office and a little place between the sanctuary and that old Wesley Hall. So anybody could pick up any phone and hear all the conversation, which is okay, except some people talk to the pastor about personal matters. You don't really need somebody listening in. And we finally convinced the colonel we could spend the money for the preacher to have a closed line so that people could talk to him without everybody hearing about it. And while we were there, when Harold Circle came, they decided that Wesley Hall was not good because it was not fancy or pretty. It was utilitarian. So they tore that down and built Wesley Hall, the one we have now. And we had a good kitchen and rooms downstairs for youth or young adults or whatever. And let me see. I lost my train of thought about that. Well, one group that met there was Boy Scouts. And when we moved there, Buddy Naglin had a troop of boys, and Jimmy had worked with the Boy Scouts in Houston, so he worked with them for quite a while. I don't know how long it was, but he got so involved with the junior choir and on the board and so many things that he didn't work with the Boy Scouts. Some of the boys were like Buster Bach and the Nelson boys. I think, no, Ken wasn't old enough. He's in a younger group.
He wasn't in that group.
No. But on one Sunday a year, the Boy Scouts ushered, and they had a little part in the service, the honor. We had quite a large group of Boy Scouts that met there. That was one group. And when we moved there, a lot of the older people had this one group. They met and had a big supper. Everybody brought something, and they fixed really complicated dishes. They were good cooks. I'm going to tell you the name of that group, but I can't right this minute. Then these were the Carbacks and the Beilsteins and some of those people. Then that kind of fell apart, And that's when we organized. See, I'm not concentrating. I'll have to tell you that later. Then we started the M&Ms, which was for couples, and the M and M stood for men and Mr. and Mrs. And that was very successful. Couples realized that people could go to men's meetings and women's meetings, but they need to relate as couples. And I don't know when I have laughed so much. They were absolutely ridiculous. All of them had funny stories to tell. And one of the funniest that we laughed at for months and months was asking the men, what did your wife wear at the wedding? Oh, something white, I think. And you know, just where did you have the wedding? Some of them were at the preacher's house, and it was hilarious, the men's view of what the wedding was. And one time, it was June, so we had anniversary. Tell something that's happened to you as a couple. Well, there's some pretty ridiculous things happened. And so we were just laughed and laughed. And then we started the card, or the game part. And we would play bridge and eights are wild, or something crazy, you know, not like real bridge. And some of those really serious bridge players, they got so nervous. Yeah,
I can see that.
things just weren't right. So we did all kinds of things like that. The Hildebrands and the lady that's in our circle who's a shut-in, what is her name? See, I need to look in here. I could probably tell you something about almost all of these, but I can't. And I do not know. Is it 10:30?
We still have time.
Huh?
Just make sure that this is still going. Bobbie, when did we start delivering meals on wheels? When did that start with our church? Do you
Well, I cannot tell you. That was organized with the Community Service Center.
Okay.
But we had a lot of volunteers. And also, in the same out at West End and that community center out there, they were serving meals. Anybody could come in, mostly senior adults who didn't get that, maybe that Meals on Wheels or something. And we went out there, and they had a cook, and the volunteers from many different churches would go out there and serve the food. And I was the bar keeper, because I served iced tea and water, and I'd get all the ice out and start handing out the drinks. Well, see, again, I can't think of his name. Well, this couple that worked out there when I did, and they washed those dishes and they washed those counters, and I would say, you're going to rub all the finish off of them. We had a dishwasher, and the man knew, he was in charge of the dishwasher machine, and he did the cooking. But later on, in the middle of the night, I'm going to think of something else.
What about the scouts? The Boy Scouts in the church?
Well, I mentioned that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I must have been out of the room. Okay.
I had a question about, I wanted Joe and Ruth to talk about their experiences with people coming into their home, into the parsonage, because that just fascinated me that people would think that was there.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Ruth can tell you about that.
Well, Bobbie has some work. She knows the lady that would do some of those things.
Yeah, this one lady.
The matriarch. told Bobbie that she came to our house or to the parsonage one time and it was locked. She couldn't go in.
Yeah, well, actually, Iona Krause's sister or sister-in-law or something came to her and said, do you know what? We went by the parsonage to check it out, and we couldn't get in. You mean they left it locked? Another thing about them, they were after all these families that had a lot of kids, and of course they made a mess. But because that was at Bob Grimes that had 4 kids.
We had 3.5 and he had 5.
Yeah, maybe you didn't keep it. Anyway, the mother went somewhere and left him there to take care of the house and the children. And they did not keep it clean because he had so many kids.
2 bedrooms.
So
1 bath.
they were fussing. And then they got Bob Grimes, who had 5 kids. We laughed about that so many times. They were so glad to see the 3 kids leave, and then they got somebody.
Okay, you mean this was their pastor that had this many children?
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't keep it up just to suit somebody?
No.
One closet, 2 bedrooms.
Yeah,
Oh dear.
It was built in 1918.
And,
is that right?
and the only telephone for the church was in the front bedroom.
Things used to be different.
Next door, I mean, it was next door like 50 feet or so.
50 feet or so from the back of the church.
Back
Yeah.
of the church.
As long as the parsonage is next to the church, everybody has access to it. Now, when we moved there, Reverend Ratliff was the pastor, and his wife, I don't know if she was completely blind or partially. Anyway, she could not see what was going on, and different ones would go in and take pity and help clean it. But some people were very critical. It was pitiful.
Was the parsonage on Clemens Street built? When we moved here in '69, the parsonage on Clemens Street was what was being used. That's where D. Ray Allison was. They're on Clemens across from Weiss at that time.
I think that D. Ray and Linda may be the first ones that.
To live there.
Wasn't he the one that bought the one up at
He's the one that bought the one up on the
Mission
hill.
Hill too? On Twin Oaks? I think he was
I think he
pastor.
was pastor then when we bought that one.
Uh-huh.
But when
I'm trying to think. Right next door to Dr. Caruso, across from Weiss.
across from Weiss, well, that's where we used to go play cards with D. Ray and Linda. I mean, 42. D. Ray and Linda. At first, and then they got the new parsonage. So that's,
I don't know.
I'd have to find
We were very proud of it because imagine when Daryl and Irene came, we built or bought a house up on Magazine because they had 4 children. And I like to tease her because we'd say, can you be on this committee? No, I'm so busy. You know, I have 4 kids. And I would say to her, well, you know, I have 4 kids. So, Vacation Bible School. They do such a great job. But when my age mothers had Vacation Bible School, it was for 2 weeks. And there was no air conditioning. I remember one that really was a success. The first week we studied about John. And we had a sand table and we built the desert and we did all kinds of things. And then we cleared it off, and the next week we studied about the boy Jesus. And we had sheep. Had to put wool on these things. But you worked your program, and in the middle of that, you let them go out to play. And they went out in that big yard out there, and John Dare and whoever that other guy was, his best friend, had charge of the kids out there because they had them playing games and serving Kool-Aid and that gave us a rest. We were so glad when it was time to let them go out, because those classes were big, because these are World War II products, you know. That parents came home from the war and got married, and they had babies, and there they were. And then they went into the youth. Now Charles Cale ought to be able to tell about some of that, because his older brother Donald and his wife sponsored the MYF.
I remember Dawn and Betty talking about that.
And one of our members met our family in our church, Bill and Joyce Borchers. Joyce had been a debutante. She was one of the better, well-to-do families. But she could get in that kitchen when we were serving, and she put a rag around her head, and she got in there and she got things done. And so then Donna Bruns came, and so they became fast friends. And as it turned out, the Borchers had a station wagon. And when it was time for the youth to go to a district or sub-district meeting, she'd fill up that station wagon. See, we didn't have seat belts then. You just cram everybody in there and away they'd go. They worked so hard with the youth. And Bill taught the men's class, which we didn't have a room for their class to meet. So they went down the gas building, United Gas or whatever that was, had their office right there on the plaza. And so Bill taught the men's class. They had to walk down there, have their Sunday school, and then walk back to our church. Oh, and while they tore down the red brick church to build the one we have now. So on Sunday morning we met down at the Braunfels. Harold Ward was in charge of the Braunfels, and we got permission for the men's class to meet down there in the morning. And men's class met in the gas company, and the church service was at the Braunfels, and which we enjoyed because it was air conditioned. And then at night, of course we always had church at night, we met with the Baptists. And one Sunday the Baptist preacher would preach and the Baptist choir would sing. The next Sunday the Methodist. And one complaint we got was, when church was over, Methodists would stand out and talk and talk. And the Baptists wanted to go home. They wanted to turn off the lights and shut the door and go home. And the Methodists are standing out there in that same First Baptist Church building and hoo-hawing and carrying on. Those Methodists, you can go home. But, you know, we had difficulties standing around talking, because when we first moved there, it was more of a German town than it is now. And after church, there'd be little groups of people talking in German. So we had trouble getting acquainted that way. You could tell the difference. They made it be a difference, that some people are from Germany, some are not. There's so many things, little tidbits that I can't think of it right now. It may be that we'll have to get some of these other people to come in and, like Charles Cale could tell about. We had a very accomplished woman be our choir director, and she got them all organized, and they did some good music. Well, the conference announced we're going to have a contest, a quartet contest, and so, of course, Shirley Rogers got 4 men singers. We had some really good ones. Organized a quartet, and they went to the district and sang, and they won. So then the district sent them to conference, and they won. They really good. And so then they got to go to Purdue to the big, I guess just national meeting of the Methodist men. And they made friends with some of the guys from the other churches. And they came home, went on a train, came home, still laughing and talking and saying what a good time it was for them. But Charles Cale's big brother, if you can imagine somebody being a big brother, Donald and his wife, Betty, worked with the youth, and they had them real organized and going to sub-districts and so forth. You can't be a youth director and be casual about it. You got to put your whole being into it because there's always something. Well, when they built the new Wesley Hall, they were talking about what we're going to do with it, and the youth could use that. Well, this one couple said, they're not going to be dancing, are they? Well, I don't know. That's part of it. They should not be dancing in the Methodist Church Hall. So the Cales were worried about that. What's they going to do? Well, they just had a party. And oh my, if they didn't start dancing, they didn't advertise it as a dance. I used to be youth, whatever they call them nowadays, working with the youth. And the Falises and the Gail Brownell's parents were sponsors for the youth. And sometimes we would have 80 kids down there. They met after church. That was another time. They had to turn off the lights and lock the door so people would go home. What was there for youth to do? Nothing. So they came to the church and we served supper to them. And that was a big group. So those people are grown-up people now. The lady that does the beauty shop here, she was doing my hair, and I said, oh yeah, when I worked. And she said, oh really, where'd you work? I said, at the Methodist Church. She said, do you know Bethel Haas? I said, I sure do know Bethel Haas. She did our nursery for maybe 15 or 20 years. And she said, well, I'm married to Mason, which is one of their children. Isn't that something? And I run into people like that all the time, that they knew me or one of my kids or at the church. So it hasn't lost all its little town stuff. And there's so many things we could talk about. The train coming through the middle of town and you just had to sit and wait.
Still do.
Couldn't move one way or the other. You just learned to do things around the train. That was part of the train. And the whistle blew every day at 12 o'clock. And I remember that the Baptist preacher complained because he wasn't through. But boy, when that 12 o'clock whistle blew, you started getting your things together and your kids getting their church. You might as well stand up and sing the closing hymn. I'm going to try to get better organized in case I left something that I need to have. I think that's about enough of me talking.
You've done a great job. I appreciate it, Bobbie.
Well, there's so many things, and our whole calendar was wrapped around the church events. And since I was church secretary, I had everything written down.
So how many years were you church secretary?
About 40.
And then you started being the senior adult counselor?
Oh no, I did that before I was secretary. I wasn't we had somebody was chairman of adults, somebody youth, and somebody children.
If you stayed on after church secretary to be the official senior.
No, that's before I was church secretary.
What did you do when Joe was on the staff?
Mostly Joe and I sat and talked.
Well, we know that, but you were
When I
also
came to work on the staff, you were the senior adult coordinator.
that's when you were organizing M&Ms and the weekly, the monthly.
Yeah,
Game
the live
plan.
aloners for widows and other people who
Did
are.
you already talk about the trips? Well, I was out, like the trips you organized?
Well, we did some local trips. A lady here in town was a travel agent, and I went in and talked to her about making a larger trip. Oh, I went to Dallas because they were showing these artifacts, and I can't think.
King Tut exhibit?
Yeah, we went to see King Tut. Now, I don't know if that was Dallas or Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Was it? We got a busload of people.
The Ramses exhibit.
Huh?
The Ramses exhibit in Granbury?
Maybe that's what it was. I know we went to see the play at Granbury, the Passion play. How they did that, I don't know. We had 20 some odd people sign up. We were on the bus, and Jim and I were in charge of it. Okay, we told them at a meal, we're going to the play. You must be here on time. This is like taking kindergarten kids. You must be here, and we would stand there and count, make sure is everybody's partner, or yes. So we went out there to see the Passion play, thinking we had everybody, and I wouldn't give them the tickets till they got off the bus. And these two ladies from San Antonio were friends of the travel agent, and they loved to travel, so they went with us several times. And this pickup drove up, and these two ladies got out. Where have you been? You went off and left us. They were late to everything. One time we went, I can't think where we were going. That's the worst part about getting old. You can't remember things. And I know we went.
Well, I have that you went to New York City, Niagara Falls,
Oh, yeah.
Chicago, and Eureka Springs.
That's right. We did. And when we came home, we wanted on the train. That's the fun. We had a whole car, and we took cards and dominoes and magazines and everything. And a lot of singing. And so on the way home, they said, now the train does not stop in New Braunfels. I don't know, maybe the city got it. It stops at a field out from the church in San Marcos. And that's how we had to get on it. And so we were talking to this conductor, and he played like an accordion. And so we sang and sang and sang. But anyway, we told him we wanted to get off. And so they got permission. We got in there at night, and right downtown, everybody had notified somebody that's where. And so when they got out of a show at the Braunfels, here we are, getting off the train. It was fun. They couldn't believe that we had been on that train. But then we went to New York on one of those trips, and so Jimmy was telling, so we organized everything so we could tell them, we're going to go here, we're going to go eat at somebody at a big Italian restaurant. And we're going to walk down Fifth Avenue, and we're going to this theater. Well, walking down Fifth Avenue, Jimmy told him, I'm going to lead the group. Harold Ward's going to bring up the tail end. You stay between me and Harold Ward. Hoo-ha. Every place we stopped, the women said, oh, I have to get a t-shirt for my grandson, or I have to get this. And he said, Harold Ward said, Jimmy, next time you're going to herd some chickens, I'll help you with that. But I'm not helping you with any more senior adults. Because they know what they're doing. And they will, honey, I'm just going to step in here and buy a t-shirt. And one time, we were in Oklahoma and we were going over to Arkansas, or the other way around. Harold Ward wants to stop at this little place. He says a very famous place, have a hotel there. And it was out in the middle of nowhere, but it was a very fine hotel. And we got off and Jimmy said, okay, such and such o'clock, be on the bus. Well, we were getting everybody together. They went in, they had a little snack bar or tea room or something. And I got everybody on the bus, and Jimmy went, he said, I'll go check. All right, he went in and he didn't come back. So I said, everybody stay here on the bus. I'm going to go see what happened. They were sitting in there, and these same two little ladies having their tea nicely. And I said, do you know that everybody is on the bus? We're ready to go. Already? My. They lived in a world apart. They both older women, and I can't remember. Maybe one of them was a school teacher. I don't know. Can't remember that part. Just delightful and nice and pretty and everything organized, but they had their own clock. All kind of things. All you have to do is get a bunch of senior adults together, and you will hear many stories. But I think I ought to close now and go back and remember some more. If I ever find that book, you're going to have to come back so I can tell the things that I've forgotten.
Okay. We'll be glad to.
That sounds good.
But I want to get some of these other people. I don't know how much Mary Clobidons can do, but she's one who's older than I am. If you can believe somebody's older than I am. Yeah.
Well, I've got Charles Kale. His is typed up and ready to go, and I just need to get with
Well,
Amber so we can get that going.
I was telling Margaret the other day that Linda Frankie, Verona's daughter, could do that.
Oh.
She lives
Yeah, I know. She's a district officer.
Yeah, she probably was.
But she's one of the younger ones. Oh, I didn't even talk about the day school.
And Harold Ward's daughter, Kathy. Maybe
Kathy.
Kathy's here.
Well, when I worked with the Cub Scouts, Jean was the other. Boy Scouts are troops. What? Huh? The others, the younger ones.
Cub.
The Cub Scouts aren't. Anyway, she had the other group, and once or twice we met together, and one time went up to their house, and there's a bunch of clean clothes on the couch, and can we sit here? And so Jean just grabbed them up and threw them onto the back of the couch and said, here, now they're out of the way. Those were the funniest people in the whole world. They were.
She was a wonderful character.
And Kathy was just a little kid, too young to participate. She just sort of hung around and peeped at us. But
Well, she ought to be old enough to remember some of the early days.
I don't know.
I would
Yeah,
think so.
Yeah, Judy Myers and
Yeah, we need to get Judy Myers.
Judy Myers and John and Gail.
And Linda, I think
Yeah.
Linda would be good. Maybe her sister, Mary, that lives in Dripping Springs. Is she older?
Is that where she lives? Oh, yeah. Linda's the youngest girl.
Okay, maybe Mary, she could get Mary to come. I know Mary's a crafty person. Does a lot of.
Well, we've got Judy
Or-
and John and Gail set up, I think, for August to try to do that.
You-
In August.
Who? What?
Judy Myers and
Oh,
John and Gail Dare. And is there somebody else, Bobbie, we should be asking about the music program? That, you know, and Joe knows so much about the music and the people we've had here at church doing our music. Is there
Oh.
And Christian education, like Pauline Ebel. Was she back with? Was she here a long time?
Who?
Pauline
Only Evil.
Ebel.
Oh, is she still alive?
No, she's not alive. But I just wonder if there's anybody that would remember some of the things that. I mean, I don't know.
And
how
they-
effective
she
was.
lived
I know
in
she
that
was very
little
active
house.
at the conference.
On the back, facing Mill Street. and she lived there, so it's close to the church.
Who was the lady that was the choir director when Charles Cale and Jimmy and so forth?
Shirley Rogers.
Okay, is there anybody in the church that would talk about her other than Charles? I know Charles thinks highly of her.
I don't know, he might can think of somebody who was in there and what they did, but Shirley would organize programs, and she wrote a Christmas skit that they were in. And I didn't even mention Mary Circle, the artist.
Yeah, we need to get that.
And
her.
when they left, they were here 7 years. I knew every story I had heard. That's a long time for a preacher to
Yeah, I think they
say.
were here even longer than that, weren't they?
They were here 11.
They were
11.
here 10, 11.
I think they were here 11.
Whatever. And then at Christmas time, she and Jimmy would get together and plan the Christmas program for the Sunday morning, and the choir would sing certain songs, and she had her easel up at front, and she painted the nativity scene while they're singing. And it was really fascinating. I really enjoyed it, but some people said, I didn't come to see her draw.
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. I loved it.
Probably jealous.
But, you know, the one thing about our church is everybody came from somewhere else. And their scripture is, we never did that before. We never did that.
Well, Bobbie, what about your children? They grew up in this church. What about having them remember
Oh, those
something?
bad kids.
Well, you've got Mickey back here now. Would he remember some things?
I don't know.
Of course, he's been gone a long time, but what about your girls? Do they have some memories?
I don't know.
Okay, well, just a thought.
What about the womanless wedding?
What?
You mentioned one time about the womanless wedding as a fundraiser.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the first fundraisers that I knew about. Judy's father, John Carback, tall, rangy outdoor man. He was the bride, and I think it was Billy Hovestad, who was a short man. He was the groom.
Womanless wedding is what you're talking about.
And Jimmy sang the solo, which I can't remember what it was, and he wore one of my dresses. I had to stuff things in and take them, you know. Ruined that dress, I'll tell you for sure. It was crazy. All these men acting up. Mabel Rutherford, Dave Rutherford's mother, organized that. And everybody in town. Used to, when you had an event like that, everybody in town came. The Methodist men used to have, we'll talk about this later, a pancake supper. The men did all the cooking and manned the kitchen, and the Boy Scouts raided tables. No woman allowed to work. And Colonel Ellis would get 10, 20 tickets, and he'd go to the bank president and say, okay, here are your tickets, you owe me, whatever. Yeah. I do? Yes, if you're going to go to the pancake supper, you got to pay for it. I didn't know I was going. But that's the way he did.
He knew how to promote.
Yeah, just go out and
Go
say,
sell the tickets.
this is the way it is.
Say, these are yours.
Yeah, I've got your tickets. Don't worry, I've got your tickets. You owe me so-and-so.
Was Colonel the one that organized that to begin with?
I do not know. I cannot tell you.
Because I know Calvin and Henry Verhosta worked as, coordinators on it for several different years. But it was already in place when we moved here. I mean, it was something that was going on.
I don't.
Women were working then too, because
You know, at the time, I had 4 little children. The oldest one was 5 when the 4th one was born. And I worked at the cleaning shop. One reason I became church secretary, I think, is to get out of
I
there.
understand
Get
that.
on the scooter even if it wasn't air conditioned.
Well,
Yeah.
your boys, Margaret, did they have memories of?
Yeah, probably. Now, Ken will talk about fashion with Colonel Ellis. Because Ken is just as opinionated and just as starry a character as Colonel Ellis, and you better do it Colonel's way, and Ken wasn't going to do it Colonel's way. So, you know.
Him or
He just
Russ,
wanted to have his recorded.
him or Russ was church treasurer, and on Sundays, he'd take the money home with him and get out the card table and sit down and count the money. And she had to take it to the bank the next day. And I don't think anybody had charge of the money, and he went around and collected or something. But when the colonel got there, it says in the handbook, there will be a committee on finance. There will be a committee on education. There will be a committee on missions. We didn't do any of that, so by cracky, he got it all organized. And we did things by the book. It's amazing when you do things by the book, how it works out.
You still have a committee to count money.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was finance. That's what they had to do on Monday morning. Helmer took the money down to the bank and deposited it, and then the next day he went and got it. And on times when he was not there, I took the money to, and I was pretty nervous about it. It was hundreds of dollars.
That's the reason it was good to have a committee. Colonel had to write out
Right.
there, because they couldn't accuse somebody then of.
And the ones who counted the money on Monday morning, and I guess they still do that, they sign, this is the amount of money we got. And they sign, yes, that is correct.
What about the property, like, you know, I know this, it was kind of, you know, the church, we sold one, we were able to get the old house out here, this other old house, you know, that was
Yeah.
cleaned off and had a parking lot, added a parking lot.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, this thing was kind of closed in for a long time with that house and the other house, the old man that lived there or somebody that
Yeah, next door, there was a cleaning shop next door to the church when we moved there.
Well, just
Now with that, you're right, that house
was out there when we came in '95. It was right out there in the middle.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I was in what had been the pastor's study, and I look out the window right at this house next door.
We couldn't do anything with it. We bought it, but he had possession till he died, or till,
He finally died.
and
didn't he?
then we could tear it down and put that parking lot
And then we
in.
did that. And
And
then waited for
we
this other
needed
house.
more parking, and so Jack Krieger had what was the Chevrolet place there, where the name of that place, restaurant,
Now it's the Cafe Clomau,
Is it?
but it was Red Rooster, and before
yeah,
that
and
it
then
was-
across the street is where Krieger had his repair things. Iona Krause's husband was in charge of that. And so Jack Krieger bought this and that part. He may have bought all of it, I don't know. And we needed parking space. We still need parking space. We are, what I've been saying, we're landlocked. That's what we are, because we can't expand. Because that washateria is on that corner, and then the people that own Weesatch, they redid that house, and his mother lives there. And when it was vacant, a lot of people said that was good parking. We could. Soon as the word got out, oh dear, the price went up. They knew the Methodist church had a lot of money; they could buy anything they want. So that took care of that Ferguson Street property, which would, and across the street is Weiss, not Weiss, whatever it is now. And we got permission, Orange, which is really a nice store.
It is.
If they parked across the street on Sunday morning, if they would use the lots closest to the street, not to the store. Well, we had, on Sunday morning, people parked over there, but you might get run over when you're crossing to the church. So asked the city council if we could put a stop sign there and close, or a stop light, and that was used on during the week for the day school people too. And they said, well, you will have to pay the insurance. Now, who is going to stand out here in the middle of traffic and direct? No, you can't do that. Okay, let's have a stop sign. That's a state highway, San Antonio Street. That was the street to go to San Antonio before they had all that stuff out yonder. There was no way we could do it. It's worth your life to cross San Antonio Street.
Still that way.
That's where we parked when
Hasn't
we first
changed.
came down here.
I don't know.
Well, when we bought the other land that we, where Green Church is,
Oh, yeah.
was that thinking that we would move someday, or was
No.
that for
No,
another
no, that was-
church?
It was
We-
always to build another
To
church.
build another
We
church?
needed
Yeah.
that church a
Another
long
congregation.
time before we got one. I mean, we really needed a new church a long time.
We
Yeah.
own some land out there on, oh gee, out by South Bank, before you get to South Bank. You remember when
Oh.
Ken Patton was on the board?
Yeah, well, yeah, they did have
They bought that land
land out there, and then they
sold
had to sell it because they had other churches that knew that.
Well, besides that,
They called me when.
some of the engineers went out there and that is not good property to
Not good
build a
property.
building.
Really?
And a lot of people very much opposed to our buying this land out there on 306. We haven't even filled up the sanctuary we got. Why you want to build another church? But
It's alive and well out there.
one of these days it's going to be, and it may be to that
Well,
I
point,
mean, that
but
church
bigger
is
than
booming.
ours.
It's booming, and they're, I mean, they're, you know, just think what if we hadn't done it.
Yeah.
Didn't Jay Webster tell us they were gonna do a capital campaign out there?
Yeah,
Again, now to
yeah,
improve, so I think they're doing well. out
they
there.
are doing well. I talked to Karen at
And
conference.
just think about how many more Methodists, I'm just preaching.
And the
Well-
area out there is going to
How
expand
many more
even
people are
more.
in the Methodist
That
churches
might be my
now
therapist coming.
because of Green, you know.
Yeah.
And out there where the Creekside is, all the stuff they're building, I mean, they're going to be building houses all around out
Well,
there.
don't
They've
we
got a
still have
hospital
some
and everything.
property out there somewhere?
I'm sorry?
Don't we still have some more property?
Yeah, but he said the other day that we did.
There's a
We
little
have
piece.
Do we have some more?
There's still a little piece left out there. Jay
Well-
said that there are hopes maybe that they can sell it to the Green
What-
Church.
Okay.
What happened was that they sold off the frontage on 306 and sold, you know, I don't know how deep it is. And then there is a strip that goes down the, what would be the north side of the property that goes the whole length of the property. And I think they're going to try to get the Green
What?
Church to buy that.
Yeah.
Well, they thought when they bought that property, they thought they could sell that other to stores. But if you bought a property that close to the church, you couldn't sell beer. And there was something else. And so, well, heck, that's no good to us. We don't want that.
Well, they did sell it though.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, they
Yeah,
sold
there
those
are
2 lots. Well, they one
There
for
are 3 lots that have been sold.
Mid-Tex or something, for a convenience store, and one
But-
for us.
They've never built one, but
Oh, yeah.
they did buy it.
Well, it's
I
not 2 lots.
don't know
Because
about
it helped
that.
pay off a lot
It
of
did. It
that.
paid off. Yeah,
Paid off a lot of that note.
right. It did.
But we paid for the property.
Right.
And my son-in-law said, oh, and they're going to pay you back. No. Well, who paid for it? We did. Surely you're going to sell it to them. No. We
Was that a
started.
mission project, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't that our?
Yeah, I mean,
mission
that was our
project?
attempt. We were a mother church doing it for our daughter church.
Yeah.
Who was going to
Now, I told one of the joys of being church secretary, you can tell the preacher what you think we ought to do. Which I'm just on the lookout, and I tell them what needs to be done, and they say, thank you, and go on about their business. But we need to go out that way. If you drive out 306 or you go out toward Kerrville, there's just all kind of housing developments out there. And he would say, well, Kerrville district might want to use that. But a lot of that is San Antonio district.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I wanted them to build out toward Maryland.